Whether you have an interest in the marijuana market or not, this is a fascinating show for any startup or entrepreneur. We take two serial entrepreneurs, one with a background in marketing and one with a background in domain name values. They met each other actually through Mike Cyger when he filmed a show for DomainSherpa in 2013. And they have built a successful, profitable company, B2B company in the marijuana space, ganjapreneur.com. Learn all about it and how you can do the same in any emerging market. Enjoy. First, serious about online trading? Secure your funds, keep your merchandise safe, and use a company that keeps the buyer and seller protected the whole way through. That's escrow.com. Payments you can trust.
FD was built by domain investors to increase your inquiries, sales, and profit. Forget spreadsheets and archived emails. Manage your entire investment portfolio in one place using a secure and completely confidential platform. Learn more at FT.com. That's EFTY, FT.com.
Hey, Sherpa Network. I'm Testy as executive producer of DomainSherpa.com. And today we have a Domain Sherpa interview with two co-founders of a business 5 years running and quite successful. I'd like to introduce you to Noel Abbott from Washington State. Hi, Noel.
Hey, Tess. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for joining us so early in the morning. You look warm.
Oh, yes. Thanks for having me. We just turned the heat on, so it's not warm, but I do have my Ganjapreneur hoodie on today.
Oh, all right. Ganjapreneur.com. Nice hoodie. And wait, is the .com on the shirt?
I don't know if it's on right here. There's, I believe, another label.
No.
This is just the Ganjapreneur logo.
Just couldn't help but ask. And the other co-founder, who incidentally you met because you did a Domain Sherpa interview, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Wild.
I was introduced to Drew by Mike after the interview that I did several years ago.
So cool. So co-founder of Ganjapreneur, Andrew Rosener. Hello.
Hey, Tess. Hey, Noel.
Howdy.
Nice to see you wearing a different hat today. Not that you have one at all, but you're in your Ganjapreneur hat today. Thank you so much for joining us to discuss a totally different angle than usual, although all things lead back to domains, don't they?
Sure do.
Yep.
So, Noel, you're really a serial entrepreneur. You, your background is in marketing. Your first company you founded is happychapmedia.com, correct?
Yep. Well, it's happychap.co right now. We do happychapmedia.com redirects. We took the media off just so that we could shorten it. We do have designs on purchasing happychap.com eventually. We're a marketing agency. We started out with just small business web development, and then we expanded from there into all aspects of digital marketing as well as print design for a lot of our clients.
Okay. It's really neat when we meet a serial entrepreneur who somewhere along the process discovered the value of domains. And I love your story from the interview you did with Mike Cyger years ago, where I'm like, oh, he's one of us. You stayed awake till 5 a.m. and spent all your rent money on domains.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, that is a true story. It was right after the Washington and Colorado states passed their measures legalizing cannabis for adult use. And I at the time was doing a lot of web development for small businesses. And so my thought process immediately went to all of the people who are going to be starting up retail shops in these cities in Washington and Colorado. And so I made a list of all of the top municipalities by population and went through and tried to buy up every version of cannabis or marijuana related to all of those cities. Over time, a few of those have sold, but I do remember there was one comment on that episode after it was aired from Drew saying that, geo is not the way to go. You want to focus on brands. And I found out later on that those brand domain names really did seem to attract a lot more attention.
That's
And
wild. And you had no idea who Drew was or that you would one day enter
not at that point
your
in time.
partnership.
No, yeah.
Hilarious. And did you, when you came on DomainSherpa for the interview with Mike, even though you know, in doing your marketing, you were seeing the value of domains, you were seeing that there was this growing, and there would continue to be this growing market for domain names as businesses begin to build in the industry. But did you even know there was a domain name industry?
I was aware, but I didn't realize the extent to which it was an industry. I knew of the process of buying domain names, kind of speculating on what domains are going to be worth in the future. At that time, I was really focused on search engine optimization, and so I was very interested in keywords, and that was ultimately what led me down the path of buying up all those geodomain names for all the cities in Washington and Colorado. Since then, I think that the impact of those exact match keywords has lessened a bit with the evolution of search algorithms. I still own a lot of them. I've sold a handful of them, but mostly what I think of now when it comes to domain names is the authority of the brand that it represents, the fact that you own the most official version of that brand.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the messaging around that brand, and
yeah,
controlling the messaging and communication that's associated with a brand, directly and indirectly, is so critical. It's why companies spend so much money, enforcing their trademarks on seemingly worthless domains, right? Mm-hmm. They'll spend $10,000, $15,000, $25,000 to go out and get a domain that is totally worthless because it contains their brand in it, because they don't want anybody to have access or control over their messaging. And yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So now Ganjapreneur does a lot more than just sell domain names.
Yes.
Give us an overview what Ganjapreneur does and who it serves.
Sure. So on a day-to-day basis, what Ganjapreneur does is we try to find the top most impactful stories for cannabis entrepreneurs or investors or anybody with a professional interest in the cannabis industry, in terms of policy or in terms of mergers and acquisitions, but it's all focused on the industry side of the cannabis equation. We don't really get into very much in the way of product reviews or, consumer-oriented media. But every day we have 3 or 4 headlines that we research and then write brief coverage of, and that goes out to a newsletter audience as well as up on the website and on our social media channels. Of course, over the past 4.5 years that we've been building it out, there are a lot of other sections of the website that we've developed. One of the earliest things that we built after the domain market was the business directory, which has become a really core part of the business overall. Something that a lot of cannabis entrepreneurs have run into when they're trying to start up their dispensary or their agricultural business is the lack of service providers out there who are willing to work with anyone who touches the plant in any way. So our directory served as a place where lawyers, consultants, accountants, all these essential business services could advertise to cannabis entrepreneurs saying, hey, we are willing to work with you. We don't care that you're not federally recognized as an industry. We want to support this movement and we're happy to do business with you. So our business directory has all of these service providers. It provides them a place to make that connection to cannabis entrepreneurs who are following our daily news coverage.
Interesting. And so, again, this is why this interview is really applicable to any entrepreneur who's looking for an opportunity in a new and growing space. I think the same could be said about crypto, where, questions about regulation, who's willing to accept it, especially in those early days. We had Charlie Shrem on here a while back. And I mean, in the beginning, there was just no regulation, but also that need for community and connection. So it sounds like truly Ganjapreneur is like the Levi Strauss store, where everyone looking to work in this industry, not only can they get the tools that they need There's also that community billboard. You have, business directory, jobs, careers, books, studies, investing, stocks. I mean, just really, I feel like it's a one-stop shop of everything a business needs to enter into this space, right?
Yeah, that's really
very
been our
focused.
goal.
Yeah, it's B2B focus. It's, we said from day one, I mean, I think it's worth noting that, like, I guess our merger of Noel and I, Noel had theganjapreneur.us, I think.
Yeah.
Oh,
and,
no.
We had originally, we might have even been theganjapreneur.com originally, and then later changed to ganjapreneur.com. Is that true? Or did we start with ganjapreneur.com?
I think we started with Ganjapreneur, but there was a lot of debate at the beginning about what was going on.
Yeah. And so, but we both had exactly the same concept. It was B2B focus, getting, digging up these articles. And especially at that time, there really wasn't many central places to find important news, not just, Tommy Chong smoked weed with some pop star. It was like meaningful regulatory, business, and investment related news for the cannabis industry. And so we both were tackling that. And obviously we had similar branding. And so it made a lot of sense after the introduction that we merged. And from that beginning, it's always been B2B focused on, the normalization of cannabis. How do we have professional and intelligent conversation about cannabis, about what is actually happening out there in the world from a business standpoint, from a research standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, and expressing that through as many channels as we can. So, we started out as basically a news aggregator, and we hired an editorial team, started producing our own editorial, and we started a podcast. We started interviewing some of the most important people in the cannabis industry, and getting that message out there through our podcast. Over time, we've built up a massive email subscriber list. I mean, I don't even know, but we've got quite a very large newsletter subscriber base. We started 5 years ago. We started before really anybody was trying to do this from that angle. And
not only did you both have similar branding, you had a lot more than that in common. I mean, you saw the trajectory of the cannabis industry, pre-legalization, early legalization, and the potential for what the business needs would be. I don't think many people at all saw that. And then for the two of you to come together and find similar branding ideas, interests and goals, now all of a sudden the broader market is starting to understand and recognize the value, the business value within the cannabis industry. And you two have a 5-year foundation, a 5-year head start. How as regulation is becoming more clear, less restrictive, the market in general is booming. How is Ganjapreneur, benefiting from that at this point in time?
Well, I'll touch on it just at a high level, and then Noel can maybe be more specific. But, it's like you said, we planted a seed 5 years ago. That seed has been growing. Now it's growing really fast because the market's growing really fast. And a rising tide lifts all boats, right? And so clearly, we're benefiting from the growth of the market. I think what's interesting from my perspective, which is going to be a bit different than Noel's perspective, but from my perspective, one of the core reasons why I started Ganjapreneur was to make my contribution towards the normalization of cannabis. That's a subject and a cause which is very meaningful to me. And so, this gave me the ability, not living in the United States and being firsthand there, which obviously Noel is, not being able to get my hands on this business and be involved in it. Digital media was a way for me to tackle it from abroad. And so it's allowed me to keep my finger on the pulse of the industry and understand what were the most important trends, who were the most important players, who are the good actors, who are the bad actors, what are some of the new consumer products that are coming to market, which ones are successful, which ones aren't, et cetera, right? And so through that, I've also been able to guide some of my angel investments in the market, as well as the topic of the DomainSherpa, which is domain names, right? So from the early days, both Noel and I, were in that first wave of cannabis-related domain names, commercially intended cannabis domain names. And so having my finger on the pulse, we've been able to register loads of very, very, very good domain names. And as I saw the market beginning to mature, Noel and I created the domain name marketplace on Ganjapreneur, which gave me an outlet to consolidate all of the cannabis-related domains, or even domains which don't have any words related to cannabis, but would make a very strong brand for somebody in the cannabis market, and to consolidate them and promote them to an extraordinarily targeted market. It's like, what is it, 80% of our audience, something around that, is either, and it's currently
either an entrepreneur or an investor of some kind.
Yeah, in the cannabis market. So
wow,
80% of our audience is like our targeted market. 80% of our audience is the people that I want to sell these domains to. And 80% of our audience.
And you've got a guy, a co-founder who specializes in marketing, and a co-founder who specializes in domain names. That's a dream, and it's great that you built this marketplace.
And I would say we both specialize in cannabis.
Yes.
So anyway, so in terms of how I benefited from, or Ganjapreneur and directly, my perspective, the benefit was in that being very much involved in the growth of the industry and watching how it evolved and understanding where the opportunities were, and, not only guiding or sometimes pulling, sometimes pushing Ganjapreneur in those directions to try and, capture the interest of those various segments of the market, but also guiding my own investments through domain names, angel investing, and other partnerships and relationships, that I've curated over the last 5 years. I think, Noel probably has a different perspective on, how Ganjapreneur has benefited.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting when we first launched, and this is what really drew me to the industry, was that it was something that was brand new. That you're taking an existing market that is just completely underground, and trying to bring it into
the light,
into the world of being regulated. One of the things that I've noticed change most significantly over the past several years is just the willingness of people to talk about what they're doing. When we first started out, not only could we barely sell any advertising on Ganjapreneur because nobody wanted to advertise what they were doing because they were so worried about some kind of crackdown or being targeted by the federal government. Now, nobody's worried about that necessarily. Maybe some of the big players on the cultivation side are still, really, being careful about all of that. But nobody's afraid to talk about it, and there are plenty of people out there trying to amplify their message. And that's where this platform that we built, while it may not have had a function early on, now we're here for people now that they're ready.
Yeah. Yep.
Makes sense. So, any vertical, you have to understand the marketing trends as your branding as an entrepreneur going into the space, or as a domain investor, right? We've seen people over time say they buy something with perfume, makeup, or aging. And all of those keywords should never be in there. If you look at every brand in that space, it's creating an idea, and it never has the keywords. No one wants to look at the word aging, right? And so we see so many inquiries about cannabis domains, about investing in cannabis domains. I mean, people know there's money to be made in it, but there are like a million nicknames for cannabis. There are so many directions to take. What are the marketing and naming trends that you're seeing, Noel?
On the naming front, I would definitely say that people are moving in the direction. Well, first of all, it's all over the place because you're getting people starting businesses from all different backgrounds. So there are people who come to it with zero prior regulated business experience. But then in terms of the brands that seem to be venture-backed or that have a really strategic execution in terms of how they go to market, we're seeing a lot more of brands avoiding cannabis in the name at all. You find a lot of like just one-word puns, slight variations on the spelling of a particular slang word for cannabis.
Like Snoop Dogg's Mary Jane.
There's that, yeah.
Okay, give me a couple other examples of.
Let's see, a company I was just speaking with is called Cushy Punch, and that's just, they make gummies, basically. But Kush is, the obvious reference there, but then they just kind of came up with their own, their own spin on it.
Kush.com just sold a few months ago for, I believe it was 500 or 600,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you want to finish, Noel? Am I interrupting you?
Oh, I was just going to continue listing names. Locally here, I enjoy a producer called Raven Grass. There's Trailblazin Productions, and there's all kinds of loose references that don't necessarily say cannabis or marijuana or something in their title.
And you find more
in general, weed is kind of the word to ignore.
Avoid, yeah.
Yeah, avoid. It's got a bad stigma, particularly like within the industry. As a consumer, it may or may not have a stigma, but as a business, very few people would ever brand on the word weed. Now, weed.com is something else. I think, you can build a high times type of consumer targeted platform on something like weed.com, right? Because it's an iconic name, but you're not going to be Weed Corporation or Weed, I don't know, whatever, right? Like it's just not, it has a stigma. It has a negative stigma. And particularly if you're trying to sell to other businesses in the industry and your company is called Weed something, that's going to give you a very bad stigma. It's going to cause people to not reply to you or answer you or want to do business with you, most likely.
Now, I have a question because
with the exception of Weed Maps, but that's consumer targeted.
That's where I was going.
So early. They were really the first. They were like, I would say they probably were the first, well, other than High Times and
well, I mean, Noel's interview with Mike Cyger was in 2013, and he was already talking about Weed Maps. So Weed Maps got in early, but other than that, generally that's avoided. Now, within a vertical, any new vertical in general, it can be difficult. Like I remember I wrote this article, it's on Media Options on the blogs, but I had an anecdote in it about Greek yogurt, right? And nobody ever heard of Greek yogurt, I don't know how many years ago, right? Like none of us grew up eating Greek yogurt. And all of a sudden now it's everywhere. And Greek words are crazy hard to say or spell. And, the company that had the most success, they started out in the US by purchasing GreekYogurt.com so that people could relate to it, understand it. And then they captured that audience and directed them to get to know their brand, right? So that I think was an appropriate marketing and a clearly successful marketing strategy for a new vertical, and their particular problem are not the same problems as the I will not call it weed industry. So like, how does someone, a business entering a new kind of uncharted space, how do they learn and watch the marketing trends? Do they go through a marketing company like Happy Chap? Do they connect with others? Is there a forum, or is there plans for a forum on Ganjapreneur? Or do they just watch and figure that out? What?
Just read. You got to just read. I mean, we've talked about a forum. I've always wanted to have a forum. But forums are difficult. They're difficult to manage. They're difficult to, they're resource intensive. And they can cause a lot of headaches and legal problems. And so we haven't.
So I mean, it's important to understand the marketing trends.
You just have to read. You have to subscribe to newsletters like Ganjapreneur so that you're getting the important articles every day and understanding what's happening in the market, understanding, where is the regulatory focus, who's successful, who's going out of business, why. We're interviewing on our podcast and in the editorial some of the top entrepreneurs in the space, and they're telling you what works, what doesn't. It's so
you're really providing the full package to businesses, giving them the resources and information, marketing strategy if needed, and the domain names. So
we're taking that a step further, actually. So one of the names that we own is bluedream.com. We had sort of launched like an alpha project on there that we didn't entirely flush out. But one of the things that we've repeatedly seen throughout the years is with the domain names, many of these companies are looking for design services, branding services, and marketing services. And, we had outsourced some of that to Happy Chap. We'd outsourced that, made referrals to folks. And, that kind of has led to several new business divisions. Noel mentioned our lead generation platform that we're building. So through our business directory, we're getting tons. So one of the things that's interesting with with cannabis industry is that folks can't advertise in mainstream media. Okay. It's highly restricted, which I think Noel mentioned earlier. And so they're looking for an outlet to get visibility in front of their audience. And primarily because you can't really sell, unless you're a dispensary, you can't sell direct to consumers. And so their clients are not the consumer. Their clients are dispensaries. Their clients are distributors. Their clients are, processors, packers, et cetera. And so how do you get in front of these people? And so Ganjapreneur represents a great platform to hit your target audience, just the way, I sort of built it with a purpose of, wow, if I can build my target audience and bring them all here to one place, I can put my domains in front of them, and then they'll want to buy those domains because they're exactly the right people I want to buy the names. And so,
you really have an incredibly unique audience. Wait a minute. So, the market is booming. Regulation is developing. So new businesses are developing around that. Every new business needs a new brand. They need a new domain. And they can't advertise in the mainstream media, which pushes them even more importance on their domain name, which means any advertising they're doing, they need a bigger impact from. They need you to remember their brand and their domain.
Not just that, but you're making a super important point specific to the cannabis industry that makes it unique. And I know I have a long-winded way of getting to the point, but that's kind of the point I was trying to get to. But a bit further is in the cannabis industry, like in crypto or any other emerging, loosely regulated or even overly regulated, but unclear regulatory frameworks, is trust. So trust is a big problem in the cannabis industry. There's a lot of bad actors. And so if you're an investor, if you're doesn't matter actually. It doesn't matter if you're a farmer. It doesn't matter if you're a packer. It doesn't matter if you're a distributor. You really have to be careful about who you work with because it's very easy to get burned. There's very little you can do if you get burned. And you also don't want to hurt your own reputation by being in bed with people who have a, less positive reputation. And so domain names become critically important because of that reason, because, typically fly-by-night shysters are not buying really good domain names. They're chasing low-hanging fruit. They're not, building for the future. And so, building on a really good domain name, a brand that feels like it's already a household name, that instills a sense of trust, critically important, more important than in most other industries, as important as that is in any industry, in any product category or service. I really feel that it's an elevated amount of importance in the cannabis industry because of just the lack of transparency and the number of, let's say, bad actors in the space.
So, we keep talking about, crypto and the cannabis industry, but and Greek yogurt. But I believe that with decentralization, with all the changes, the freedom, you've talked, Drew, so much about globalization in the past. We're really entering a new era where I believe there are going to be more and more and more of these totally new, unexpected, unregulated industries. And in a way, you're creating a roadmap for success in anything new that comes along. Would you agree with that?
No, so when I say no, I don't think we're, inventing anything. We didn't reinvent the wheel here. It's B2B media. It's been done, many, many, many other times. Actually, you know what? A great segue into a little anecdote and story, which is Entrepreneur, that everybody knows, entrepreneur.com, Entrepreneur Magazine, had, I don't even, Noel knows the details more, but we had been introduced to them, or somehow they had come into us with an interest in advertising on Ganjapreneur. And, that sort of segued into, hey, we aren't sure if you guys are maybe infringing on our trademark. And it was like, what? We were here since 2013. We've got our own trademarks. And, what are you trying to do in the space? Maybe you're infringing on ours, right? And so I had, Noel had several conversations with them, and, it had sort of teetered between, hey, let's do business, and hey, there might be some legal conflict here. It's all good, and they've formally acknowledged that we are, in no way infringing on their trademark. It's a little bit less clear about whether or not they're infringing on ours, but neither here nor there. What I can say is Entrepreneur Magazine has entered the cannabis space, right? So to your point, we didn't reinvent, we didn't invent anything here. We just took what's been done in the past by others in other industries, and we created it for a new industry, which was cannabis, or a new legal industry.
One thing that we are doing different than most B2B publishers is that we haven't really pursued anything in the world of print media so far. The way that most of the B2B publishers that are out there, including the ones that have focused on cannabis as an industry, they make most of their revenue through a print magazine and through hosting events. And we have done neither. We have existed pretty much entirely in the digital world, except for when we make appearances at events. So we have had to develop new parts of the site to drive revenue. We've, with the domain market, with the business directory, these are not things that we invented either, but just combining all of these different revenue generating structures into one platform that's core function is to be a daily publisher of relevant news and information. I feel like that trajectory has been very interesting to explore and develop and figure out what works and what doesn't work, because it has allowed us to really grow this from the ground up with very little upfront investment. And we're trying to figure out how to make digital media profitable, whereas you see all the mainstream media companies plastering
losing
Google
money.
ads all over the place, and they're outsourcing their daily writing to robots, things like that. Like, if we can continue to make this work, I think that there's hope for digital media going forward, and that that approach could be applied to pretty much any new industry that comes out.
Yeah, great point.
Absolutely. Okay, so I refined my statement.
Bootstrapped, and to Noel's credit, right? Because I was the drill sergeant saying we're not spending more money, and Noel's made it work. But this thing has been bootstrapped, and I mean bootstrapped from day one, and it is now a profitable business that's growing rapidly. And you just can't say that about, there's very few digital media players that in any space which are actually making profit. Lots that are growing but not making profit. This is a profitable venture, and I think that's that's not only worth noting, but it's unique. But where I just wanted to sort of bring that story to conclusion with Entrepreneur Magazine, because they entered the space with a very inferior brand, which is Green Entrepreneur. And so Green Entrepreneur, first off, in my opinion, infringes on ganjapreneur.com. But that's neither here nor there. I can promise you that if we weren't, if we hadn't taken ownership of the Ganjapreneur brand, trademarked the heck out of it, and put it into commerce since 2013 in the cannabis industry, that's where they would have loved to live, for sure. And they've said that in more or less in their own words. I mean, Ganjapreneur is the distinction. It's we were the first one to come out with that as a name, and since then it's like you watch any mainstream CNBC runs a story about cannabis. Well, how are they referring to the entrepreneurs in the cannabis space? They're ganjapreneurs. There's TV shows called The Ganjapreneur Show. There's, yeah.
Did you invent, I am not an expert in the cannabis space. Did you invent that term yourself? Or you saw the domain and thought it was cool, but you'd never heard that term, or that was a term people used before you bought it?
There was definitely colloquial
because of your brand.
There was definitely colloquial use of the word ganjapreneur. Yeah. But it wasn't being used commercially anywhere.
Okay. Let's talk domains. In the beginning, Noel, you were buying, especially that night, you stayed up all night, spent all your rent money. Look at that, sigh, so long ago. You bought a lot of geo-focused domains, both in Washington and in Colorado.
Yes.
And you mentioned some guy named Drew Rosener posted a comment and said, branding's the way to go. Mm-hmm. So you bought all those. What happened with them?
Well, a couple of them did sell. A couple of them I still own. I let a few of them expire. I did for a while try to go out and solicit directly to the retailers once they were up and running in all these cities that I had bought the domains for. I pretty much was met with zero response from anybody.
Okay.
It turns out that the retailers weren't really interested in search engine optimization because they were looking to platforms like Weedmaps that had become the de facto search engine for cannabis, and they didn't need to invest in the the same type of architecture that a competitive retailer of a different industry would need to invest in if they wanted to show up in Google. Okay. And then also there were just so many of them who had no idea what they should be doing in terms of digital marketing. They were just focused on selling cannabis.
Okay. And is that generally, that whole picture still true today?
It is to a larger to a degree. It's not. I'd say it has lessened a bit. I think that there are more and more people coming into the space who are arriving with an idea of what they need to do on the marketing and branding front, and then there are people who have been slogging it out. The few who made it this far have kind of figured out that, this is what separates the successful companies from the companies that go under. But yeah, it's still very much kind of a free for all. There's a lot of people out there in the industry who aren't paying very much attention to it, or who aren't making that a priority in growing their business.
Okay,
I hate to make the analogy again between the cannabis industry and the crypto industry, but it's hard not to, just because these are two multi-billion-dollar industries that have suddenly emerged out of nowhere, and become seriously viable verticals and industries. Cannabis was just named, I think it was the New York Times just said, fastest growing industry in the world, or fastest growing industry in the United States for sure. And so the idea of low-hanging fruit. So in the very early days, right, like everybody else who's been out there registering domain names for whatever emerging trend, emerging vertical, the idea of low-hanging fruit and timing is a very important one. So, I bought all these domains, as did Noel, 5 years ago or more, and thinking, oh my God, I know this company, they need this domain. Of course they want to have this domain. And you would call them up, or you email them, or they might even email you. And there was no way they were buying that domain for any kind of price that you wanted, right? And it was because if you're a dispensary, right, you're not getting clients, except for maybe a very small, a couple of markets in the United States, which are like uber competitive. For the most part, it's jurisdictional. So you've got a dispensary here, it's close by, that's where you're going to go. And if you've got your medical card, you're just going to go to the closest dispensary. And there's very little differentiation. And if there is differentiation, it's by the products that they carry. Nothing to do with marketing, nothing to do with branding. It's got to do with location, and it's got to do with availability of products that the consumer wants. Nothing more. If the worst dispensary in America bought weed.com, they would still be the worst dispensary in America. They would just have an asset that was probably worth more than their business. If the best dispensary in America went from weed.com to we sell weed and it's really good.com, they would still be the best dispensary in America, because that domain name wouldn't influence their business in any way. Now, when you get into consumer goods, the actual products that are being sold, and as the market evolves and matures, and as entrants from other spaces, people who were working at Google, people who were working at Amazon, people who were building some of the world's most famous consumer products and services are now entering the cannabis space, as many programmers and mathematicians entered the crypto space from those organizations. You get a new perspective. You get people who really understand marketing, branding, and they're looking for the longevity of their business. They're not looking for that quick buck, gold rush. And that's where we're at now. And we just hit a tipping point within the last few months where this market evolved. It went beyond most of the very, very early players have been bought out, gone out of business, regulated out, arrested, very, very, very few survived, because most of the very early entrepreneurs in this space were not business savvy. They were coming from an underground world. They couldn't handle the regulation. They didn't know about digital marketing, SEO, advertising. They don't know about, how to create, consumer products, packaging, shipping, logistics, distribution, all of these things which are critical to a successful business and the longevity of your business. These just simply, and this is not judgmental in any way, right? Like, I have a lot of friends that are in that box, but they simply weren't suited to compete against the guy that was a, Nestle vice president of marketing global, who decided, oh my God, this is a huge industry. I'm going to go start a new chocolate company that will be cannabis infused, right? The guy that was making them in his mom's kitchen and, can't even keep up with supply to keep the dispensaries he sells to happy, he can't compete against Mr., Nestle executive. And that's where we're at, right? So now those folks have come in. They've come in over the last 2 years. There's serious venture capital money coming in to back those people. And those people need domains, right? So it's all the fruits of our labor are only being picked now. It's in the last couple of months. And it will now continue probably for the next 5 years, maybe even 10, as the market matures and evolves. But then we'll reach a point of sort of saturation, and these domains will not be as critical again. It's like I tell people in the just general domain market when they come to me with a super premium domain, and they say, "Well, I want to sell this domain." And it's like, well, there are no startups anymore in this space. There are no, and I'm not referring to cannabis because we're still very early, right? But in a mature market, and I'm just trying to emphasize why it's important to sell into a growing immature market before it becomes mature. Because once it becomes mature, these things aren't as critical. The field has been set, the players are known, and you establish household brands and names, and then it's just a game of attrition and mergers and killing off the weak. And
so if there's a time to sell within this space, it's now to the next 10 years. And you would recommend if
probably the next 5 years, probably now, and that in some cases, right? Like, so the names that I sold in 2013, 14, 15, I regret selling those names. I wish I never sold them, right? Like, sold many names that I wish I still had today to work.
Give me examples.
Way more money.
I've got a good one. This was the when I was buying geographic domain names. There's a city in Colorado called Aurora, and I bought auroracannabis.com and put it up as a buy it now domain on Cedo. And one day I got an alert saying, "Hey, someone bought your domain for $1,420." And I was like, "Yes, my rent money." And then I find out, like 3 years later, 4 years later, Aurora Cannabis is one of the biggest producers in Canada, and they currently have a market cap of almost $10 billion. So if I had not listed it as buy it now, thinking geodomains, and I had been thinking a little bit more about the usefulness of a brand, I could have got 10 or 20 times more for that sale.
Easily.
But, yeah.
You should write them a letter and just say, "Hey,
do you guys want to advertise with entrepreneurs?"
Yeah, just be like, "Look, here's the deal, man. I've been an advocate. We've been trying to push this industry forward. I run entrepreneur.com, and here's the deal. I have this domain. I put a buy it now price of $1,000, and I'm not going to lie to you. I have a hard time sleeping at night knowing that I sold it to you for $1,000. I'd feel so much better if you guys would just become a sponsor of our show."
Hilarious. Well, it looks like over the years they rebranded to at least on the domain name, to auroramj.com, but they're a publicly traded company. I mean, this is, you're right. Some geos can also have another meaning. Aurora in particular, how beautiful. Is now time to still buy cannabis names? First of all, no one should be sitting around at home thinking up new domains and registering them, brand new registrations. You're not going to get anything of value. Agreed?
Mostly. This market's been picked through very effectively.
Okay. So tell me some domains that have sold on ganjapreneur.com marketplace. Noel.
Sure. Recently, we sold a couple in the $1,000 to $5,000 range. There was one called carnivore.com, like carnivore, but carnivore.
Cute.
Like that one.
Hemperors, so emperors with hemp at the beginning. Wannagrow.com sold.
Like Juana, like marijuana.
Wanna grow.
Which one of you owned juanadomain.com?
Not us. That's
us.
Actually
awkward.
That's a client of Happy Chaps, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Super
Hired us a few years ago to build that out for him.
Okay. Yeah. Great brand. Okay, sorry, keep going.
We've had a lot of inquiries on CBD domains, and then one that we sold recently was Renew CBD. A lot of the CBD domains have very high asking prices, the ones that we represent. So, we've had dozens of inquiries in the past couple months on a few of them.
Really, dozens. Okay. And do you believe they'll sell at those asking prices, that CBD is really the focus right now?
It's hard to say. Nobody's bit yet. I mean, these are asking prices of $50,000, $75,000 for, just one word with CBD.
Okay, like what?
What's the one that we keep getting inquiries on, Andrew? Do you remember? It's
it's funny. It's not even like
CBDdirect.com.
Yeah, CBD
that one
Direct
gets
is the
a
most
lot of
popular.
inquiries.
Hands down, probably by a factor of 5, the most popular domain on our platform. 2-3 times a week, we get inquiries for that domain. And people make decent offers, but they haven't met the owner's price. I mean, in the early days, I remember we had some pretty good offers, like 15 grand, 25 grand for CBD Direct. And I was like, this guy's crazy not to be selling for that price. But the offers just keep coming. It's like really 2 or 3 a week, and he's firm, pretty firm in his price. So who knows? Maybe he's a smart one.
Drew, let's get back to your regrets. Give me 3 domains you regret selling.
Nug.com, which also sold in the Ganjapreneur marketplace.
Spell that?
Nug.com.
Okay, N-U-G.
N-U-G. What else?
Come on, they keep you up at night.
I mean, actually, we sold that for a good price, but I still regret it because it's one of the best brands in the space. I mean, I regret selling MJ.com. That's, my opinion, that's the name. That's potentially, at least top 3.
How long ago did you sell MJ.com?
Not long ago, like a year ago. But like I said, we hit a tipping point in the very last few months. I can't actually talk about the details of the sale, but we have some, let's say, tail on that deal. And so, if I had held it for just a little bit longer, we would have made a magnitude of order more proceeds on that sale. But nonetheless,
And another one that sold through the market, I believe, was Icky.
Oh yeah. Icky.com. That was our name too. That was a great sale. Icky. I like that one just because of Snoop Dogg. It was, the sticky icky. And weed. No stems, no sticks, no seeds. So I don't know, Icky.com, but it turned out those guys were like they make like a humidor for your cannabis. That one sold for the price.
So here's the thing: what does an investor, a domain investor, what do they do today, right? Because all these brands are especially in, say, the $1,000 to $5,000 range, like you mentioned, Noel, they're all very playful. They're all specific. Like they're not, it sounds like pretty much all, how we talk about having the ability to pivot, and a brand like Uber could be anything. It sounds like in this space, they're looking for something that does say, we're in the cannabis space, but something that's a play on words, that's a memorable brand.
It really depends on what they're trying to do in this space, right? So you've got, like, if we just look at the hierarchy and we start at the top and we'll work our way down. So you've got these like vertically integrated players that are huge. Most of them reside in Canada because they can, in the US, you're limited. You can only work in one state for the most part. And so you can't achieve any economies of scale by having multiple state licenses at this point. And so the biggest players in the world are in Canada. So if we look at them, it's like, Canopy or Aurora or Afria or, Slang. I don't know if they're Canadian. They're on the Canadian exchange. I don't know if they're Canadian or if they're a US company. Flower One. they're US, I believe. They also might be Canadian. I'm not sure. But these are huge vertically integrated players, and their names have nothing to do with cannabis.
Okay.
And
that's like top tier. Next tier?
Yeah. So then you've got the people who are distributing. And in this market, there's a lot of various ways of distributing. You've got like statewide distribution, like Southern Wine and Spirits, for example, is the largest alcohol and liquor distributor in America. And in California, they created a separate company. I can't think of the name right now, but they are trying to become the largest cannabis distributor, at least on the West Coast. And so I don't know what the brand is, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't have anything to do with cannabis either. And but again, that's a B2B business, and so it doesn't necessarily need to say cannabis. They just need the relationships and the trust.
Is it Ganja Runner?
No, definitely not.
Right.
No.
Okay, that's right. Okay. So what's on the next level after the distributors?
Well, and then so you've got the dispensaries, and we've already talked about that. And then you've got the people who are producing the products who are selling to dispensaries and selling to distributors. And that's where it gets a little more interesting. So those are the people that need to create a product that sort of insinuates somehow that it could be a cannabis product, but they don't necessarily want to call it a cannabis product. But in some cases, that's not true. Some cases, like right now, CBD is such a big, not only just a big product category, but it's such a big deal, and people are searching for it. There is no household brand, right? So people are searching for the product. And so having CBD in your name has tremendous advantages from a search, conversion, and marketing standpoint. But that may very well change as that market matures and players become established. Their company brand will be far more important than their, you've got company brands right now producing CBD products that don't even live at their company brand domain name. They live at, some domain name that contains the word CBD, so that they can advertise and people know what it is and click on it and convert. So having CBD, if you're trying to sell CBD products, it's super important to have the word CBD in your name. Because otherwise your consumer won't know what it is you sell. Willow is a great brand, but if you are, if you're Willow and you're selling CBD products and you're just out there advertising as Willow, nobody's going to know what you sell.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for you to reach the consumer today because of regulatory confinement. Well, both. It's not just regulatory, right? Because a lot of these companies are actually taking their own decisions to not allow advertising and promotion on these platforms.
Why?
When legally they could. Well, I can't answer that question.
Okay. So here's my end question. How, to all the domain investors who want to invest in this growing space, do they buy, do they spend their rent money on 100 domains that they think are cutesy and fun combinations of potential brands? Do they spend their money, do they pool that and spend it on one or two domains that are higher value and the same, cutesy combo? How would you strategically advise a domain investor with $3,000 to $7,000 to invest in this space, in domains in this space?
No.
What I do is I look at what's expiring. There's a lot of brands that people are giving up on that they registered 5 or 6 years ago, and maybe their expectations were too high on what kind of offers they were going to get. Maybe they overcommitted and registered like 5,000 domains, and they're just letting the ones that they care less about expire. So there are some good ones that come up through expiration. There's definitely nothing left in terms of hand registering something for $15 unless you get it right after it expires and nobody else wants it. but auctions and what's expiring are generally what I keep an eye on. Of course, the domain market has a bunch of domains in that, the entrepreneur market has a bunch of domains in that $1,000 to $5,000 range. If you are looking to start a company up, I don't know if that's the best route for a speculator, unless you know that there's somebody who wants to start that business.
There are a lot of arbitrage opportunities, like where you can go out and buy a name, on our marketplace for $1,000 to $5,000 if you've got targeted.
Is that a dog?
Insight.
Yeah, it's a dog.
Bring the dog up. Sorry, Drew, you're not as interesting as the dog.
Sammy. This is
Hi,
Samantha.
Sammy. Hi, Sammy. Aw, cute dog. Okay, sorry, Drew. You're
That's
important.
Right. So, there are arbitrage opportunities if you've got unique insight, meaning that a particular segment, a particular category, a particular company, is going to be expanding, and this domain will become increasingly more important. Then, buying it prior to that becoming common knowledge is an arbitrage opportunity. But for the most part, I agree. I think you got to be opportunistic. I don't think you're not going to have any luck trying to be clever and coming up with cute names and putting them together. And, the numbers on that just are bad. You'd have to own a lot of them in order to see any type of efficiencies, meaning to see a certain consistent sell-through rate. And so I don't think it's a viable business. I think buying, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 really good names on expiry where you're not competing against the end users, you're competing against other domain investors. Do your homework, understand what sells, look at the landscape, go on Entrepreneur, go in our business directory, look at what the companies are called out there. Look at who are the companies that are successful in the industry and how do they name themselves, and use those types of insights to create what could be the next companies that follow suit. And, otherwise buying product and descriptive, exact match keyword domains will always be a successful, as long as you don't overpay, will always be a successful target. If you own, the exact match keyword for specific products and categories in the cannabis industry, you'll find a buyer. May or may not meet your price expectations. You may have to sit on it for a while, but those names ultimately almost always sell. Okay. But it's hard. It's hard. And, if you want to capture, if you want to ride the wave of any growing industry, you got to get in before all the other surfers. That's just how it is. So, that's kind of what we're on here, talking. That's what we've been saying. Is like, this is an overnight success, 5 years in the making. We were registering these names 5 years ago, and they're only just now starting to sell because the market's starting to hit a level of maturity. And so there is still a lot of opportunity from domains, but don't try and get cute. Don't try and, but I do think that probably from an overall domain market standpoint, I think that this year, last year is unequivocally, the crypto market represented a very, I don't know exactly the number, but it was a sizable chunk, 20, 30% of our total sales, were into the crypto market. Big names. And the majority of those had nothing to do with crypto, right? Mm-hmm. There was no crypto word in there. It was just brands. I think that the same will be said this year or next year, perhaps even several years to come, in the cannabis market. This is going to be the place where the most new companies are created, the most new brands are created. And as you said earlier, all of that leads back to domains. And so all those companies need domains. And if they want to have longevity, they need good domains. And,
brilliant. Now, here's a question.
The more important these domains become.
Here's a question. This is the final question that I've planned for you guys. Drew, you love to ask other people this question. What would you say for entrepreneur.com what's the enterprise value that this domain, the authority behind this domain, has brought? Can you put a number on that? I mean, Noel, you are such a numbers guy. I've seen, some of your behind the scenes paperwork, and you are beautifully data driven. What are your thoughts? Could you put a number on that?
It would be hard to be precise, but the impact that it had is undeniable. Just compared to, when we were on theganjapreneur.us, when we switched over to ganjapreneur.com, and we were able to say that in a phone call with a potential advertiser or with someone who we just wanted to get a quote for an article, something like that. The difference in response was noticeable immediately. People just all of a sudden trusted us, like, oh, you're a real thing now. And then the effect that just having this brand, which was a concept that people were aware of colloquially, and it's a term that people use on their Instagram, like a hashtag that they just put on their own.
It's an identity.
It's an identity.
That's huge. Yeah.
And so being the brand associated with that identity has really positioned us to be the most attractive place for people to get the word out about whatever it is that they're working on. And we are the place where people go to keep in touch with the news that impacts their career trajectory or their investment portfolio or whatever their involvement in the cannabis industry is. But having that at the core of the business, I think, has been really integral to getting us where we are today.
Okay, but you didn't give me a number. Come on. Although you gave me a great joke, or not. Noel Abbott and Andrew Rosener, ladies and gentlemen, the most attractive people in the entrepreneur space. Okay, come on, give me a number.
I don't know. I think the business could be valued today in the $6 to $8 million range, potentially as high as 10 if we wanted to be ambitious. And I think the enterprise value of Ganja, I mean, it really is. I mean, I know I'm the guy pressuring other people that come on the show to give us that number, and it really is difficult. The thing is if we sold the domain tomorrow, and said, oh, great, we got a great price, we sold the domain. Now we're going to just rebrand onto, even if we picked another great brand, Ganjapreneur, for what it is we're doing, is the perfect name. It's we're trying to be, for entrepreneurs, by entrepreneurs in the ganja market, right? So it's Ganjapreneur. There's no better way to say it.
And you're kind of professionalizing this identity. You're turning this identity into something a place where businesses can connect.
We're normalizing it. That's the whole point.
You're cleaning out all the non-business, like you were saying in the news. We don't want to be weedbiz.com. We don't want to be. We're Ganjapreneur. Yeah.
So
Noel
I don't
was
know.
almost going to give me a number, and you stopped it.
I don't know. I think very, unique to our organization. It's got to be, a strong percentage of enterprise value. It's got to be, I don't know, at least 5%, 10% of enterprise value, at least.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. I mean, at this point, you can't extract the business from the name, right? So the business and the name are one and the same. But I think, if we went through the intellectual exercise of trying to extract it and saying, what is the name worth itself? It probably is something like 5%, maybe even 10% of, maybe even more, just because we are, like Noel said, we don't have a print application. So if we had a print magazine, it would probably be less, even though the print magazine would probably be a loss leader. And I think for most of these publications, it is a loss leader. It's a great way to capture more advertising because, unfortunately, advertising executives, marketing executives still have a love of tangible print media.
You could print it on rolling papers. There's recycling.
Yeah. I think that it would be, the point is, if we had a print version of Ganjapreneur, I think that the enterprise value of the domain itself would be less of the total enterprise value than it is for us, because we're strictly digital. And I think, for any digital business, you live and die by your domain. You just do. It's just fact of life. So yeah, probably, maybe it's even more than 10% for us.
I think so. I don't know how detailed we want to get into it, but we had a few conversations last year with people who were interested in outright acquiring the business. And in those conversations, the domain name and the brand was
the majority of the value.
It was the majority of the value. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, those were not small numbers to be dealing with. And
yeah.
Good for you too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as we wrap it up here, Noel, what do you want people to know? Whether it's something new that Ganjapreneur is rolling out, or, business advice as you are coming to identify yourself as a serial entrepreneur. And you bootstrapped something from nothing into a, $8 to $10 million brand. So, as you've really, and it was cute to see you in 2013 and how young you were, and now you're all grown up. And what advice do you have? What do you want other young entrepreneurs to know?
I think if there's one thing that applies to pretty much any venture that you're going into, is to really understand and appreciate the value that your brand has, not just in the name, but in how you present it visually, how you present it in terms of the voice, how you present it in terms of the mission of whatever that venture is that you're working on. If that is all, apparent to the people that you're approaching just on their first impression, it's going to make everything easier for you going forward. And we've gone through several iterations with the Ganjapreneur brand. Just last summer, we finished a rebrand that I had my partner in Happy Chap help us with. And the impact that makes when you have consistency and, you've clearly put a lot of thought into how everything looks. It's indescribable how much of an impact that has. People just assume that you're offering something of value when they perceive that from their first impression. And if you offer something of value to back that up, then everything is just easier. And
you got a customer for life.
Yeah. Fabulous.
Yeah.
Well,
completely agree with what Noel said. I had a follow-on thought that I just lost. So I'll leave it at that.
Did you want to say anything further about, what you'll be doing with Blue Dream? Give us a little more of a preview there.
Yeah, it's a little early to go into much detail, but essentially we touched on it. We were selling, a number of domains through the Ganjapreneur domain marketplace. Nothing revolutionary. It's just that we've got that target audience, right? And so each of those businesses needs design services and branding and marketing. And so we're going to launch Blue Dream to help meet those needs. And I think we've got, an interesting take on it. And we've got some of the best resources in the business to, I think, help these people fulfill the ideas that they've got. Going to design and marketing agencies outside of the cannabis industry, this is such a unique space because of the limitations on marketing and advertising, because of the regulatory environment, because of the fact that marketing and advertising is really hyper local, because you can't be a California business and sell to somebody in New York. So for a variety of reasons, the cannabis market is extremely unique. And so I think there is a unique opportunity for folks who are highly experienced in this market to better address the needs of folks entering the market, rather than going to firms which are from outside the industry. They don't understand the intricacies, and those intricacies can be very slight, but very meaningful. We speak to people all the time that contact us from outside the industry, representing clients that may want to advertise with us, and you can just see it in the way that they speak and what they write. They don't quite understand how it works. They don't quite understand the perceptions in the market, the sensitivities in the market. And so, the days of, being just blatant and throwing it in your face of cannabis and weed and, get high as fuck and,
pot leaves everywhere.
Yeah, pot leaves everywhere. And that's done, right? Nobody wants that. We're moving towards normalization. And so you want, you just have to approach it in a very specific way. And I think we're uniquely positioned because we've been at this so long and we've gone through so many iterations of our own. We've launched several other websites, in the industry on our own, on great domains. And so I think this is going to be, I think it's going to be really, really successful.
It's going to be a very exciting next chapter. Good for you both. Congratulations to you both. What a fabulous success story on the foundation of a great domain with two smart, hardworking serial entrepreneurs. Kudos. Thanks for taking the time.
The credit with entrepreneur really goes to Noel. I mean, I've been more the money guy and sort of maybe big picture trying to guide where we're heading. But Noel is, he is the one pulling up his boots every day. I mean,
And as much as I'd love to take all the credit, I couldn't do it without a team of really hardworking, competent remote workers, including my brother, including TG Brandfault, who's been a host of the podcast and a journalist for us for a long time, my partner Casey and Happy Chap, and everybody just
Cody
just gets the work done. Cody especially, yeah.
Cody's a rock star. I mean, we've just got an amazing team. I'll tell you what. Here's the deal. I am going to pat myself on the back. Because one thing that I really will say I have been influential in, I suppose, in general, is I've got two completely distributed teams running two super successful businesses. Media Options, totally distributed team. Entrepreneur, completely distributed team. And everybody works well. We have virtually zero turnover. The core team, at least, has had no turnover. And, we're all making it happen. It's just, that's great. I think that's really something special that we've done, is having this completely distributed team that is driving home a clear, concise message consistently since 5 years. Shout out to the Entrepreneur team, Cody, TG, Graham,
Sammy the dog.
Sammy the dog, yes.
Sammy the dog for sure.
Nice. Well, thank you guys. Noel, I hope that you come on again and that 5 or 6 years have not passed before we see you again. Really interesting to hear what's going on in this space. And while you're right, you haven't created this roadmap, but how you've applied it and how others can apply it, I think that's really generous of you to spend the time here. And I know so many in our audience who are entrepreneurs or who are interested in this particular vertical are really going to benefit. Your support for spending the time. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next time.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.